Okay, welcome to the next instalment of Unit 20 and 24. This blog post you should entitle, as appears on the screen, Advertising Slogans. So could you please just make your blog posts now? Advertising slogans. So we're going to look at the use of advertising slogans today. The image on the screen, I'm just going to show you this very quickly. This is from one of my favourite adverts of recent years.
Supplies. I said send supplies.
Say again?
So there you go. That's most people will be familiar with Specsavers' really famous slogan, should have gone to Specsavers. Now, normally at this point, I would ask you to think of some advertising slogans. In fact, I'm going to ask you to do that now. Just ask you to spend a couple of minutes thinking of some famous advertising slogans. So see if you can think of maybe 5 different advertising slogans, and then just think about why they're successful, why are they memorable, do they use any particular persuasive techniques? You might want to think back to, I know it's a long time ago, but you might want to think back to when you were doing English. I'm sure at some point you would have done some work on persuasive features in English. So yeah, think of anywhere between 3 and 5 slogans, jot them down in your blogs, and just explain why they're memorable and what persuasive techniques they use. If you spend a couple of minutes doing that, I'm going to kind of pause this recording, and then once you've done that, just continue it. So hopefully there you would have come up with a number of different slogans. I'm sure most people have come up with the kind of Nike and McDonald's slogans. Most people are aware of "Just Do It" for Nike. McDonald's, "I'm loving it." Other really famous ones are, I think it's L'Oreal, "Because You're Worth It." Then there's "Enjoy Coca-Cola." There's the Specsavers ones we just looked at. So there's lots of different slogans and lots of different techniques used in them that use persuasive language features. I'm going to go through a few of these. I know when I used to teach English, and when we did that, we used to do persuasive features. I don't know if you had a similar kind of thing at JCoSS or wherever you did your GCSEs, but we used to have something called either Lad Forest or Da Forest, and it was an acronym with lots of different persuasive features in. And we're going to go through a few now, and then I'll see if I can sort of populate the list with a few other ones as well. So you need to take notes as we're going through this. So the first advertising techniques we'll look at, on the left-hand side you'll see the technique, and on the right-hand side you'll see the reason why they're used. Okay, so the first one would be a brand summary, and the reason that it's used is it makes the brand's benefits and specialities clear. Quite a famous example of this one, this brand summary, I'm not sure if you'd have come across it, is for a product called Ronseal, and Ronseal make sort of wood varnishes and various things that you can use for DIY, and their famous slogan was, "It does exactly what it says on the tin." So that would summarise, the effectiveness of Ronseal. Next one on the list there is brief. So you think most slogans are, I mentioned a couple earlier: "Just Do It," "I'm loving it," "Because You're Worth It," "Enjoy Coca-Cola." The more succinct, the more concise, the more brief that your technique can be, the better. So each advertising technique, it should be clear, should be to the point, and if you can get that concision and that brevity, it should mean that it's memorable. So if you think of most famous advertising slogans, there's very few of them that are really, really long. Most of them tend to be quite short. Okay, so fairly sort of obvious couple of ones here. So next one on the list is rhymes, which are easy to remember because they stick in the mind. The next one on the list is the repetition of brand name, and you'll find this. I'll show you some examples in a minute, but you'll find that a lot of advertising companies, whether it's in a moving image advert or whether it's in a print advert, you'll see that the name of the brand is actually repeated throughout that advert. So on the right hand side, repeating something 3 times or more helps it to become more memorable. You might have come across this before. It's called the rule of 3 or triples. I know on the screen it says it 3 times or more helps it to become memorable. Another technique that's used widely in persuasive language is the rule of 3, where if you can use 3 adjectives to describe something, it's often more effective. Something about the human brain, it picks up on groups of threes better than it does 2s or 4s. So repetition brand name, if you can do it 3 times, that's usually quite effective. In a print ad, you might repeat the brand's name more than that. It might be on there numerous times. But that idea of repetition is really important. Next on the list, again, this is sort of going back to probably English. You would have done at GCSE, especially English language. Alliteration in persuasive language. So alliteration is, it says on the right hand side, similar to rhyming, but alliteration is where you repeat the same consonant sound. So for example, big bad boy uses alliteration on the letter B. So alliteration is used quite widely in advertising. And then the next one on the list, use of second person. Consumer feels spoken to personally and involved in the product or identity on offer. So I think the most famous example of this is, and you've probably all seen it during the Second World War, the First World War, when they used the image of General Kitchener with the slogan, "Your country needs you," and "you" was written in really large font. This is one of the sort of earlier examples of it, but you'll see this throughout advertising, where second person is used to create some sort of personal connection with the person at whom the advert is aimed. So for example, the L'Oreal advert I mentioned earlier, because you're worth it, the consumer thinks, oh wow, that's really nice, I'm worth it, they're speaking directly to me. So it creates this link between the advertising company and the person at whom the advert is directed. I think you'll find as well that there's quite a lot of imperatives used in advertising slogans. An imperative is, I suppose it's kind of similar to use of second person. An imperative is a command. So for example, in the Nike slogan, "Just do it," that is a command. It's telling you, to get up off the settee and go and do some sport, etc. I know that you're only allowed out once a day at the moment, but in theory, that's what it means. So use of second person really important, and imperatives can be really important in as a persuasive technique as well. Okay, oh, there it is actually. I've sort of jumped the gun a bit there. So there's imperatives at the bottom. Assertive demands designed to sweep the consumer along an agreement. So we covered that one already, just up to this one. Use of every and always indicates the company's unswerving commitment. So, for example, I think always Coca-Cola, I think that was one of their famous advertising slogans. It's this idea of we're always there for you, we're always open. It's that kind of idea of, that the company has commitment. The present tense one, that idea of universality and timelessness, you'll find that a lot of advertising slogans are written in the present tense. I guess one of the most famous of these is probably the McDonald's one, that awful, terrible, dreadful advert where they always say, "I'm loving it" at the end. So that's what is that? That's present continuous tense. If you write something in the past tense, probably the suggestion there is that the company's fallen on hard times and it's no longer operational. So you want something to be in the present tense, you want it to be in the moment, you want it to be in the now. So this is just the last set. You've got use of capitals for emphasis. So this would be how it's written, how it appears on the page. You find some companies, we'll look at some examples in a minute, sometimes they use capitals. If they're aiming for a different sort of aesthetic behind it, they might use lowercase. And then you can look at stuff like sans serif, whether they're using serif fonts, the type of font as well. But purely in terms of language, I guess looking at how and when they use capital letters. The next one, humour is really important. Consumers are entertained, so tend to be well disposed towards the brand. I think one of the most successful examples of this as a campaign is probably the Specsavers one. Should have gone to Specsavers. When those adverts first came out, it was, people were widely using them in schools, I remember. If someone did something wrong, there'd always be this, should have gone to Specsavers. So anything with humour tends to make a slogan stick in your mind. And very closely linked to that is the one at the bottom. So use of puns and wordplay gives a second layer of meaning to impress the consumer with its smartness and novelty. There was for wordplay, just as a quick example of this, there was a Land Rover advertisement a few years ago. Land Rovers make 4x4s, and the slogan for it was the best 4x4 by far. So that's an example of using wordplay and puns. So yeah, that's some really important language devices. I'm sure there's some that we've missed out. I think another really important one, again something you probably would have looked at in English at some point, is the use of emotive language. So emotive language is anything that makes you feel a certain emotion. So for example, if you were to advertise something like the RSPCA, if you were to do one of those adverts, a charity advert, and you've got a little dog, sorry to keep using dog examples, but you've got a little dog in a shelter that needs to be taken home. It's unlikely you'd just say, take this dog home. You'd say, this poor, bedraggled, unhappy dog, will you find him a home? So using emotive language, you feel sorry for the dog, you really want to care for the dog. So that's that's another really important use of persuasive language features. I think just to go back up to the top again, that use of the rule of three, anything that's said in a triple, plus emotive language, plus all those listed on the infographic, they're really, really important. This will be the first part of this PowerPoint. I'm going to do the next part, and we'll look at some real world examples, and then I'll get you to do a few of your own as well.